Hello, and welcome to this week's episode Embracing Accountability and Healthy Relationships with Lisa Shield. The ways to engage with this episode are as follows. Think of 5 things you have sacrificed in the past or currently sacrifice for a relationship. What's something non negotiable that you no longer want to give up when being in a relationship? Remind yourself of this while dating or speaking to your partner. Don't sacrifice something that nourishes your soul. We hope this helps you and gives you a guide today and something to think about as you're listening to this week's episode with Lisa Shield. Enjoy and have a great week. Let's talk about prioritizing self-care in your life. Let's start with that because self-care does feed into how we show up relationally. So talk to me about your self-care journey and what that's looked like for you.
Well, I think self-care was at the heart of me being able to attract the partner that I'm my husband, who I've been with for 22 years. But it wasn't until I really looked at my self and my mental health and my physical appearance and all of these things that I was able to feel confident enough to be with a man like this. I think, when we're not taking care of ourselves, especially mentally, psychologically, and we know that we're letting ourselves down because we don't have a handle on our emotions and on our emotional well-being. And, we're drama queens and we know that we're embarrassed by how we're showing up. And so it takes a lot of personal inner work and sorting through all of our own stuff, not to bring that to a man. And then the second thing was just with my own physical appearance. I struggled for years and years and years with my weight. And so it took I'm the kind of person that when I see a serious ongoing issue in my life, I take a step back and I take a very, very serious approach. And I had done enough diets and enough superficial things that I saw I couldn't sustain. I would go and I'd do a diet for a short while. I'd lose some weight and then I'd put it right back on and then some. And so one day I just said, look, you've got to look at this in a whole new way. And I went to a 12-step program for food and I was there for 4 years. Wow. And it was like boot camp. I learned, I really looked at myself. I looked at how I lied to myself. I looked at how I lacked self-discipline. And all of these deeper cuts got me to where I am now.
Yeah. The deeper cuts thing, I think that so many times when we approach our health and how we take care of ourselves, historically, we take a very linear approach and we don't look at the whole package of what's impacting these choices we're making and why we're making them. And this sounds like it was a much more holistic approach from looking at all of the different patterns and why. Why do these things exist? What's happening here that is promoting these decisions, these choices, how I'm existing in the world. So I really think that's an interesting, you hear 12-step a lot in other things, but approaching it this way, it sounds like they really factored in all of those pieces.
Well, and 12-step programs it's a spiritual path. People don't always realize that, but it's 12 steps really, to your higher power. And so you're surrendering and you are learning in a very practical way. There's no religious aspect, but it's deeply spiritual and it's about getting rigorously honest with yourself. And I think one of the things, Melissa, for me and for many of our clients, most people do not sit and really get honest with themselves about how long something has been going on in their lives. These things, these issues, it's not like you sign up for a 4-week class and you're going to suddenly have this massive breakthrough and change your life if you're an adult and something has been an ongoing issue.
Yeah.
So I really am a huge believer that when something is a chronic issue, it really does require a very, very serious long-term approach to change. And we need groups, we need community, we need support, and I don't even feel, often I think really group support is much, much more impactful than just doing one-on-one support. I think one-on-one support can be a part of our approach, but I think
Sure.
group support is even more impactful because you're working in a community of other people who have similar issues to you.
Yeah.
And so it's a very different thing. And a lot of people are very afraid of how vulnerable they'll have to be in a group.
Yeah.
They don't want to show up in a group because it's easier to hide out, with a therapist.
Yeah. Yeah. No, you make a really good point there. That authenticity, but we get very uncomfortable and squirmy in sitting in that discomfort. And it's until you're willing to sit in that discomfort, you can't get on the other side of it if you don't acknowledge it, deal with it. But when you see you're not alone, you see there's other people around you, it takes the stigma off. It takes that negative self-talk off. Like, wait a minute. I'm not a mess. I'm a complex human being that has some things to walk out. But guess what? So do a lot of other people. And we can do this together and build trust. So I think there's so much power in that. I agree. So what is it for you personally in doing this work that you do now and not taking on the emotions of other people as you're doing it too? And where you came from before this. I mean, you were in a prior relationship where it just wasn't working and you knew that. So what does a daily regimen of self-care now look like for you with all that you've learned? How do you take care of you so you can be the best you? First for you, which you've learned is so valuable, but also for the people you work with, your relationships, all those places that you show up in.
To be very honest, I think that once you achieve a certain level of self-actualization, Melissa, there's always different ways of doing, of maintaining our, that level of well-being.
Yeah.
At this point in my life, the way that I maintain it is by giving back. And so I spend a tremendous amount of time creating my courses, working with the women who are in my program.
Yeah.
And one of the biggest pieces of all is that my husband truly is the guardian of my soul. And we have what we call a guardian of our soul relationship. When I was searching for a partner, one of my intentions in finding a partner, we work with our clients to find what we call their final 5. And the final 5 are the 5 things that you've sacrificed in the past that you must have in your next relationship. So they're not arbitrary. You don't pull them out of the clouds.
Yeah.
This is very much looking at where you settled in the past and how you have to be a stand for yourself. So one of my final 5 was that my partner would be my greatest teacher. And, really people don't realize, Melissa, when they get into a relationship, they don't realize that when you're sitting there in front of the man that you have been dreaming of, that you have longed for, that you've been searching for, and you have no idea how you're going to feel when you sit across from that guy, right?
Yeah.
And so I really do believe, for all the work I've done, for all the gurus and the teachers and whatever that I've ever met,
Hmm.
My husband really is the most evolved human being I've ever known.
Wow.
And so I don't have to look very far
Yeah.
to find my inspiration. My husband is the wisest, kindest, most compassionate human being I've met in my life.
Yeah.
And so that's how I maintain my sanity, how I
Sure.
stay grounded. My relationship is my spiritual practice.
I love that. That's really beautiful. And when you can trust someone at that level, like they're going to be like, hey, it looks like you might be getting a little, let's take a little time. Let's go for a walk. Let's talk about this. They see you, you trust them. It creates so much space for that careful interaction, that mindfulness with each other. I love what you talked about too, of identifying those 5 things, because we give so much of ourselves away and we just keep compromising and compromising and compromising, because we as women are so many times told to show up for everybody else in every way possible that benefits for them, with no thought for ourselves, because we're taught this false narrative that can be considered selfish. And we end up in these spaces of like, this is never how I intended my life to be, how I intended my relationship to look, how I intended to feel. So I love that you hone in on that. That is so powerful. And then when you meet that person, you're on the same page. There's an understanding and a respect that those things will be honored because they're non-negotiables for you. And so you automatically create a different kind of synchronicity and respect for each other because of that. That is fantastic. That's really beautiful.
Well, in my work, Melissa, is very much, you described, before this call, how you and your husband met and what the journey you went through to bring your relationship to where it is today. I work from a bit of a different angle because I am working with single women
Yeah.
who are searching for a partner.
Yeah.
And so our goal is to make this a golden opportunity, right? To to empower our women with all the awareness, with all the clarity and all the right tools, so that when they go out into the dating world, this isn't some random process, of crossing your fingers and hoping, and praying for the right guy to show up. This is a real process that I've developed based on the work I did. And so we get them, we get to, my theory when I was dating was, look, I'm going to have to go on these dates. I'm going to have to put myself out there to find this person.
Right.
So why not use every single one of these dates to grow, to learn, to become more comfortable with men, to meet, to sit across from as many men as I can and start to really develop that muscle, because I think most women really don't understand men. We don't know what they want from us. We have this list a mile long of what we're looking for.
Right.
But a relationship goes both ways. And it is like, for me, when I was dating, I really humbled myself and I was like, wait a minute, you know nothing about men, right?
Yeah.
Nothing.
Yeah.
And so that's what I used dating for, so that I could, when I met my guy, I wanted to be the best partner for him that I could be.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a two-way street. It is like a relationship involves both people, and both people have needs, desires, hopes, a life that they want to live, a way they want to be seen, honored, heard, respected. So I think that's a really good point that you talk about there. And I love how you use that. And we're going to come back to the dating thing again, because I love that when we get into the expectations piece, because I love the story of you tell about the date you went on and meeting your husband and how that clicked with you. So we're going to revisit that. Confidently setting boundaries, healthy boundaries, things that work for you. After coming out of cycles of things, a cycle in a relationship of what wasn't working, how did the boundaries piece come into that? Did that play into those 5 things of like, okay, we're going to do this differently, better, healthier this time? And it feels like there's got to be a connection with that.
Well, so those 5 things are boundaries, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, that's a boundary. One of my boundaries was I needed a man who had done his psycho-spiritual work. And
Right.
I mean psychological and spiritual.
Right.
Because they're 2 very different things. You can have these guys with man buns who sit around and act like they're yogis and whatever. But they haven't done their psychological work and they're still wounded and damaged and, controlling and manipulating women with their with their spiritual stuff. So you need both pieces, right? So that was a boundary.
Yeah.
And then it's up to us not to change those boundaries, to hold those boundaries.
Yeah.
And a lot of the women, what's so incredible is how many very smart, successful women just will put up with garbage from men. And I'm not talking down. Believe me, I am one of those women.
Sure. Yep.
I came from this feeling that I wasn't beautiful. I wasn't flirtatious. I didn't have what other women had. And so I came from that, and I felt like I was invisible to men. And so I had to first say to myself, like, for me, Melissa, it wasn't about being more physically beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
That there's gorgeous women who are who have no relationships or horrible relationships. Yep. I was actually a fashion photographer. In my early career for 15 years, I shot fashion. And some of these models would show up for photo shoots and they had bruises on them because their boyfriends beat them up.
Wow.
So it has nothing to do with how we look.
Yeah.
And what I realized was that it had nothing to do with that. It had to do with how I made a man feel when he sat across from me. And if I was compassionate and in my heart and genuinely interested about this man sitting across from me, about his dreams, his ambitions, and I wasn't self-centered, I didn't make it all about me. But so many of these strong women are so afraid to ask for what they want. And they're so afraid to have boundaries with men because they think if they do, they'll sound needy or weak or bitchy or insecure. And so we teach the women in our program these beautiful ways of setting boundaries and asking for what they want. And my husband works with me in my program. Mm-hmm. And so we have just, people have said to us, Lisa, I don't know of anybody who languages things like you and Benjamin do.
Yeah. And that's really powerful. Words are powerful. And what they mean and how we share them, we can say the same thing, quote, a lot of different ways, and it may not be effective or healthy. So that, I'm so glad you said that. That words and that light goes off. We're like, oh, wow, okay. Now I understand. Now I get it. I think that's so important. I'm so glad you said that. That's really powerful. And I think sometimes we underestimate the power of saying something the right way, in a way that's healthy, that connects with people. So good. Oh, so good. We talk about taking care of our emotional health, mental health, spiritual health, as much as our physical health. We talk a lot about physical health, but we don't tend to those other areas. I mean, you gave a great example earlier of the guy who has shown up, with all the spiritual woo-woo stuff, but didn't dive into the psychological health piece of it. So talk to me about your journey and connecting those dots, seeing the importance of not just the physical, but the mental, emotional, spiritual as well.
Yeah. So when I was my dad was really a narcissist. He was an alcoholic.
Mm.
And alcoholism and narcissism, addiction, they go hand in hand.
Yeah.
And he was pretty hardcore. So children of alcoholics and narcissists often tend to become that.
Oh,
It's
wow.
just, it's inculcated into the family dynamic.
Yeah.
And I was very much going down that path.
Mm.
And there was a point where I was living in Milan, Italy. I was with my ex-husband of 13. We were together for 13 years and I was at bottom. And I just was really lost. I thought, I can't keep doing this. I don't know how I'm going to get myself out of this. I mean, I really hit a real bottom. And I went into the darkroom for 3 months and just started printing. And I really did have a spiritual awakening. I had a little tiny book by Paramahansa Yogananda. I'm not a follower, but it was a very helpful book. Every few pages was a different spiritual principle. And I would read a few pages and then I'd go into the darkroom and I'd print and I'd contemplate what was there. And the very first lesson was about personal responsibility. And if you know anything about anything to do with personal growth, taking personal responsibility is usually the first step.
Yeah.
And narcissists are just chronic victims. And I started to think about how I had been playing the victim and, where this was getting me in my life and what it actually meant to take personal responsibility for myself and my life.
Yeah.
And it was just such a huge turning point for me to realize that I had been playing the victim and that I needed to start to be accountable for my choices, for what I was doing, so that was the beginning. And it was like pulling a thread. And then so many other things just, it was just like it all unraveled, this facade, this lie, this narcissistic facade that I had been, putting out to the world. And that was the beginning of me really starting to look at myself and take ownership of my, who I was being in the world.
Yeah.
So that was the beginning of my spiritual awakening. And, I just started to look at everything, how I talked, when I would tell stories, I told myself, you're not going to play the victim. You're going to, have a positive outcome. Everything that you say, it's not like I'm the furthest thing from a Pollyanna. I'm a realist.
Yeah.
But I would always find something positive, a positive note to land on, you know.
Sure.
And it was a whole unraveling of that. But it started with me taking responsibility for who I was being, the choices I was making, how I was showing up in the world, and my impact.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And I love how you talk about accountability and choices. I think that there's so much strength in that when we can step outside of ourselves. And I love how your art and your work connected you to that, because I think that can be a really strong connect point too when we're sitting with our creative selves and allowing ourselves space and time. You allowed yourself space and time to sit in all of that and let it come to the surface. So you could, and we're in this fast-paced world. We don't want to take the time. We're afraid of what will come bubbling up to the surface. Because it's hard. This is not an easy journey to take. And, when you grow up in an environment and that is what it's difficult to step outside of that and be like, whoa, wait a minute. I don't have to just be a product of my environment. I can make a choice here and make a change to go down a different road. It's also my responsibility to do that as an adult. But there's a lot in there, though, that gets in our way because of these old narratives that we've heard. So I love how you spoke to that piece. That's so powerful. And it really goes nicely into how, and this is you, we support ourselves and other women and living unapologetically. You learned how, through this process, how to show up unapologetically as you are, as yourself, with these ways that you were going to live and things that you were not going to give up anymore. And now you're helping other women find that path as well. So talk to me about that point where it's like, wait a minute, I'm onto something here, and I think I can help other women as well.
So I went on, when I left, so I wound up leaving my first husband, and 8 years later, I met my now husband. I went on 96 first dates. I dated for 2 solid years. I'm definitely one of the qualities I would have said, at the character traits is that I'm I'm really out of the box, and I'm like, I'll try anything, I'll try things. I mean, I'm not bungee jumping. I'm not a thrill seeker, but I'm a first responder. Like, I'll do anything. Like, I'll try things. And so internet dating was brand new. And I was like, this is amazing. Like, I can meet more guys. I have more control over my dating. This is amazing. And so in 2 years, I went on 96 first dates. My husband was the 96th date. And I just met the guardian of my soul, the man that I adore.
Yeah.
And we've been together for 22 years now.
Wow.
And so when I met him, one of the most beautiful things was 3 months after we met, he said to me, you should be a therapist or a coach. I had another business after I was an importer. I imported from Mexico and Vietnam after I gave up my photography career. And I wound up, I looked at him and I said, why do you say that? And he said, because that's your passion. That's all you talk about is personal transformation.
Yeah.
And so I was getting my master's at the time in spiritual psychology. So I sold my business and I went into a coaching training program, and nobody was doing love coaching at the time. No one. I didn't know of anybody. And so I thought, this is really a unique thing. It's something I went from thinking I was going to be alone for the rest of my life to, having the most beautiful relationship I knew of.
Yeah.
And so I thought, if anybody could teach women how to do this, it would be me, right? I would have wanted to learn. My younger self would have loved to have learned from my, current self, everything I know. And so I thought, wow, what an incredible thing. If I could help other women like me who think, oh my God, I'm going to die alone, and I could show them how to find true love, why not? So that's how I got here.
I love that. And going back to the guardian of your soul piece, when you meet that person who cares about the integrity of your soul and who you are as much as you do, that's priceless. But we teach people how to treat us, by the way we show up and how we show up for them. And I think there's a lot of power in that dating that you went on, how you were learning from that and learning how to show up as yourself with these ways that you knew were non-negotiable for you. And getting to that 96th date and having someone see that in you and call that out in you so early is it's like, okay, this is possible. Someone, when you show up unapologetically, but I think sometimes unapologetic gets attached to really kind of fierce, ferocious, and it can be, but it also can just be fully, authentically who you are. Empathetic, kind, compassionate, curious. And I have this vision of you showing up in those ways. It's such an invitation, but it's a beautiful invitation. And that's, I think, how we all want to show up, but we don't always have the pieces we need to get there. That language that you use, the way you talk to women about these things. I think there's so much power in that. And it's not only serving and finding that person you connect with, that partner, but also just in your life, how you connect in relationships, period. The quality of the relationships you're going to have in your life when you understand how to show up in this type of unapologetic way. I would think that it branches beyond just the relationship you and your husband have.
Well, it does. I mean, it touches, everything. And one of the things that really is unique, Melissa, about the work that we do, which really is a stand apart from anybody doing this work, um, it has been said to me over and over again by other professionals in my field and people who know the work that Benjamin and I are doing, and my team, of course. I have the most amazing team that I work with. But the thing that we have heard, I've heard, is that people will say, I have never heard a woman speak about her husband the way you talk about Benjamin. And in 22 years, I've never said an unkind word about him.
Yeah.
I really, really, really love this man. And I see his soul. I see who he is and how he treats me, how he shows up.
Yeah.
So what we're showing women how to find is not a soulmate, but it really is a guardian of your soul relationship.
Yeah.
So I don't know of anybody who's doing the work that we do. I think there are dating coaches. I think there are love coaches. I honestly just, from the feedback, like I had, I went out for drinks with a friend of mine here in Santa Fe who's a matchmaker. And she just looked at me and she said, Lisa, I've been doing this work for decades. Mm-hmm. And she said, I have never heard a woman talk about her husband the way you speak about Benjamin. Mm-hmm. And I knew that even she was admiring. I mean, she, is married, but she was admiring of our relationship, and she's met Benjamin. She knows him. So, and she said he is pure. She said he really is a pure soul. So I say that in answer to your question, that what we're doing touches so many people, and where we're guiding people to is not just to find a guy or how to date. It's really to find unconditional love, which many of our clients have found.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. That's really beautiful. And I loved what you said about when she pointed out she hadn't heard anybody talk about your husband that way. Sadly, there's so much commentary out there. And I remember this very specifically. When my kids were little, there was a neighborhood of moms that would get together every Friday. Kids would play together. That was a day that a lot of people weren't working or were working half days or whatever. Got together, kids played, moms had lunch, caught up. I pulled myself out of it about 6 months in. Was our next door neighbor, so my kids could still go over and play on every Friday, because the toxicity level of the way these women were talking about their husbands was so poisonous. I just couldn't do it anymore. I just came out of there feeling yucky. And I had nothing to contribute because I didn't feel that way about my husband. He's not perfect, but I just, that's not how we talk about each other. That's not how we honor each other. Not, like I said, we both have our quirks and we laugh about things, with our close friends or whatever. But this was just like, I'm like, and I told my husband, I'm like, I got to get myself out of this. It's just, I don't like it. And that, I think, has become if you're feeling that way, something needs to shift, because this is not a way to live. And it's certainly not a kind of engaging conversations I would hope that you would want and be looking for. And so when you said that, and I'm like, sadly, I would love to see us get to a point where how you talk about your husband is the norm. That's how, it's not seen as special anymore, because it's the expectation that we have of our relationships, of our partners, which really goes nicely into, living out of your own expectations versus others. You would imagine, and it connects with the why and values. Like, you had a solid going into this, when you started going on the 95 to get to 96 states, there had to be people who are like, wow, what is she doing here? This is wild. But you had a sense that you knew your why, you understood, you had a set of values, and you had some expectations as well tied into this, going into where you understood why you were doing this. But and I think if more people went with that kind of intentionality, we'd see more of these more honoring conversations. But talk to me about that before you started this. When you started this practice of doing this for a couple of years, what were kind of the why, values, expectations, questions you went into with it, or did they evolve as you went through the process?
God, that's a great question. My why was, I had another very real spiritual, breakthrough. I was in a 12-step meeting. At the beginning of some meetings, they're called meditation meetings. So we had a short meditation at the beginning of that meeting. And I was reading The Power of Now at the time. And I had always thought that, unconditional love was this thing that we strived for and that it was an ideal, but it wasn't real.
Yeah.
And and that it was something that you had to become, live many lives or just become an ascended master, but that it wasn't something that anyone could have. And as I was reading The Power of Now and I was in this meditation, it just came to me that if all we have is the eternal now, then we can have unconditional love now. That this isn't a fantasy, that all these spiritual paths are teaching us how to get to God, or what I believe is synonymous with, representation of unconditional love.
Yeah.
And so that once I had that moment, that breakthrough, I was like, I'm going to find this because this is real. It does exist. It's actually what we're here for.
Yeah.
And so that was my why. I really, I wanted to see if that was something that was actually attainable. Now, this isn't, I really want anybody who's listening here to understand something. I'm not a perfect person. It's not like I am some perfect human being, but I do have what I would say is the closest thing to to an unconditionally loving relationship with my husband. I mean, we adore each other. We treat each other with respect and kindness and compassion and patience and gratitude and all of these spiritual concepts. We really live those those ideas in our relationship with each other. And if you were to hang out with us and spend time with us, you would see how we talk to each other, how we adore each other, how we respect each other. And it's not something, that's out there and that we're striving to be. We don't even work at this.
Yeah.
We went out to dinner last night and we were talking and I said, honey, why do you like hanging out with me? I mean, I really meant that. Like, why do you enjoy my company so much? And he said, well, do you have a month for me, for me to sit and tell you all the reasons why? And he had tears in his eyes when he said that.
Wow.
And he really meant it, and I'm never fishing for compliments.
Right.
I'm never looking for my husband to compliment me or whatever. But, we were talking about how hard it is for us to find other couples where we both enjoy, it's like, the woman will be great or the guy will be great.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I know exactly yes, I do. Yes, I do know what you mean. Absolutely.
And I may really like she may be my friend, but he doesn't want to hang out with her partner, whatever. And so we just don't find that many couples where both partners, our neighbors across the street, are wonderful and we love both of them and we just can't get enough of, spending time with them. But couples like that are very few and far between for us.
Yeah.
And so we were talking about how hard it is for us to find other couples to hang out with. We have, two friends, Randy and Cynthia, that are like, our soulmates. We love,
Mhm.
love, love them. And we could just spend, all the time in the world with them. But there are so few of these couples. And so I was saying, but, why do you enjoy my company so much? So it was very, very sweet. But yeah, it's kind of a struggle.
It is. And it's too bad, but I think the work you're doing helps move that needle in the right direction. And, goes in talking into living out of your own expectations versus others. You set an expectation
Yeah.
and you honored that expectation. And your husband has done the same thing for himself and with you. I mean, you both came into this with an understanding and an expectation. And it's okay to do that. And we don't have to live out of these other expectations. Just sometimes don't set the bar high enough in terms of what we are deserving of having and what is possible. When
Yeah.
you're willing to set that, communicate that, you were very forthcoming with that with each other. So that allows you to live in this honoring way where you do show up authentically because you came into it. You didn't set this low bar. So I think that has a lot to do with it too.
And Melissa, we're so real. Like if you hung out with us, we're so approachable. We're so real. It's not like, I think people sometimes will put people on a pedestal or look up to them. And honestly, like we're the opposite of that, We really are. And it's so down to earth. It's just, Benjamin, my husband, is the most humble man. He's just so humble. And he's so of service. Like one of the things Benjamin does for the women in our program is he writes their online dating profile. And Benjamin,
that's brilliant, actually, coming from the man's perspective. From this,
not just any man. Benjamin is a brilliant writer. I mean, it's really important to distinguish. Like, there's a different
the kind of man he is. I mean, the very humble kind, but then self-aware. I mean, there's so many pieces that go into this.
Well, and he is, and he writes, he said when he writes these profiles, he hears music in his ears. And if you read the profiles, they're amazing. I mean, men cry when they read them, and they write to our clients and they say, you said everything I've ever wanted to say, only so much better, and they really speak to these men's hearts. And so, he is but what I was going to share with you about the kind of man he is, he'll get the material to write a profile. And if he gets finished at 10 o'clock at night with his work, he will sit there at 10 o'clock at night and write that woman's profile because he doesn't want her to wait. Yeah. And he is so of service, and he will turn those profiles around in 24 hours or less.
Wow.
For these women, out of service, out of dedication and respect for our clients. I mean, it's amazing. I couldn't do it.
Yeah.
But, when you speak of humility, it's just, he is so, it's amazing. So I don't want anybody to think that this is something exalted. This is the most, the truth is it's the most real thing in the world to have this.
Well, you said something earlier about when we put people on pedestals, that's a danger zone because you're just setting that up for failure. We weren't designed to be put on pedestals. We're humans, and we're going to show up as humans in our most rawest, authentic, selves. And so I love that you pointed that out, because do you get pushback from people? There's so many skeptics out there, and there's so many people that they've been, I'm using quotes, failed by love, all these different things. And how do you talk to that when that comes back at you? Because I would imagine you probably get some of that pushback.
Well, we get a lot of it, like on my Facebook ads, because we advertise on Facebook for, to connect with clients. That's one of the main ways we do it. And a lot of women just write these really man bashing, mean, you
Mhm.
know, poor, woe is me kind of victim-y,
Yeah.
responses, and they lash out and they lash out. So we hide those comments because they're not
Sure.
constructive.
Yeah.
And, but, there's a lot of really angry, bitter, jilted women out there. And look, I get it. I mean, we've all had heartache in our
Yeah.
lives. I mean, I've had my share of it too,
Yeah.
but I had to make a decision. Yeah, do I want to be a victim for the rest of my life and blame men,
Yeah.
or do
Yep.
I want to look at this and focus on the solution or the problem? These
Yeah.
women focus on the problem. And I want to work with people who are winners and want to take ownership and
Yeah.
look at this and say, hey, there's a lot of jerks out there, but I chose those guys. I said yes to them.
Yeah.
They didn't just waltz into my life.
Yeah.
And even after I realized they weren't right for me, I still stuck around when I
Yeah.
should have left,
Yeah.
and I want to learn a better way. There's got to be good men out there. Not all men are like my ex-husband or my father or whomever.
Yeah.
There's good men, just like, there are bad men, and there are good women, just like there's, entitled, bitchy,
Just
manipulative women.
yeah. And I think, it goes back to that old adage, hurt people,
Yeah.
and it's making that decision for yourself that you are going to take control of the narrative and you are going to empower yourself and you're not going to live in this place. And you also seeing yourself as valuable and worthy of it. You are valuable and worthy of it, but it's not going to just happen. You've got to take the narrative and decide you're going to switch that. You got to it's a choice and being accountable. But I think you got to start. I am worthy of this. It's going to take some work and commitment on my part. It's not just going to happen for me. But continuing down this road, showing up in this way, is not going to attract anything good, because this is just, it goes back to that kind of spewing poison thing. And we don't realize the impact that has. And it's like, you're the only one that can change that within yourself. No one else can change that for you. And so, yeah, that being willing to do that, you are valuable, you are worthy, and you got to go do something about it. But in my experience, I would see that the value place plays a big role in that turning point, I think, of seeing yourself as worthy of doing that work and that you do have choices. Has that been your experience with your own personal self as well as the women you work with as well?
Well, yeah, I think taking ownership is where we start to take back our power. I remember, I'll share a really funny story with you. I had a sponsor in my food program when I was in 12 step.
Mm-hmm.
And I went to go see my dad once. I was visiting my father. We had a difficult relationship. And I one day was just standing there with my dad. And I was like, you don't understand how, what you did. Like, you left my mother when I was 8 years old. I have a very hard time with relationships, and I said, I think you really impacted, how I connect with men. And I was sitting there, my dad wouldn't take responsibility. He wouldn't admit it. And finally he took ownership. Finally he said, okay, I can see where this affected you. So I went to my sponsor and I said, I finally got my dad to admit that, he left my mom and that really, that he was not a good father. And my sponsor started laughing and he said, wow, you really did a really great job of blaming your dad for where you are. And he said, I'm going to tell you something. There's a lot of women who didn't have good fathers who still have great relationships with men. All you did was get your dad to take responsibility for that. You just, you blamed him and you got him to own up to it. But there's lots of women on the planet who didn't get great fathers who still have great relationships. And he was right. That was really eye-opening for me
Yeah.
because he was right. Like I could blame my dad from now until forever.
Mhm.
But the truth was there's lots of women who still have great relationships with their dads. I mean,
Yeah.
with their partners or with men. And I am now one of those women because I stopped being a victim. My
Yeah.
dad had his own journey and his own story and his own reasons for why he did the things he did.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that, yes, did it impact me? Sure.
Absolutely.
But did I have choices? And could I learn from who my father was and find a man who wasn't like my dad? Absolutely. And
Yeah.
that's what I did. I actually looked for a man who had none of the qualities of my father.
Absolutely. Well, I think there's that kind of both and thing. Did that impact you? Absolutely. Absolutely influenced it. And you have the power to change that narrative and go a different road. And so many times we don't get to the and. We stay stuck in that first part because whether your dad did or didn't take, and that's very nice that he did that. That doesn't happen a lot in these scenarios. But until you made the decision to do the work yourself, that wasn't him acknowledging that wasn't going to change your trajectory forward. It had to go. You had to move forward with that. And so I think that's a very important piece is we spend so much time in our lives chasing that. I had a very emotionally volatile upbringing. And my parents' choices and the way they interacted with me had a big impact on my life. And they have not been able to understand the and piece of like, listen, I get how you got there based on as an adult now seeing your background. And also it had an impact. And now I have a responsibility to change that narrative for me in my generation. And me, so many times we chase that acknowledgement that you can't control. And it's and whether and at the end of the day, okay, they acknowledged it. Okay, I know that in my head, but what's changing for me now? Nothing unless I decide to take the steps and see that I can have something better, something different, and not just sit here in this space and blame all these other things around me and not make any changes myself. So I think that I love how you bring those things together. I think that's so powerful. And it goes back to when I've talked, choices, seeing ourselves. And sometimes the choices are hard. And there are many, many things that happen to us that we can't control. But we can control our responses. We can control what we do with it. And I think we got to take the shame piece off of, when we look back at those decisions we made about those bad relationships, get curious about it instead of judgmental. Listen, that's where I was at the time. I didn't understand. I was still stuck in this victim mindset. I didn't fully understand or have the confidence or belief or whatever it was or emotional maturity to understand that I could make better decisions. I learned that. I don't have to do that again. I think too many times we see women getting these patterns where they get out of one relationship and they just choose another bad relationship. And they don't change the trajectory of the patterns and see their part in it. Like, you have a part in this. It's not just these why do you attract these relationships? What is happening within you that attracts these relationships? What choices are you making to be in these relationships? So I really feel like you hit on that so well and bring all those pieces together.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Melissa. That really means a lot.
I love that because I think there's too many times we get stuck in this one place and it's like, listen, I understand that had an impact. I get that. My husband and I both came from a different kind of abusive cycle, but he still, as an adult, had to make choices of what he was and wasn't going to do. He still had to decide to heal, to not have that impact. I think so many times we have so many unhealed people who they want to live in that past piece and not take accountability to how do I change that narrative? How do I not carry that forward? And that starts with your own accountability and being willing to go there and seeing yourself as worthy of it, but also not using the other things as an excuse. Accepting the layered aspects of ourselves. accepting all those parts of our lives, those past choices, those past ways of being. For me, my approach, I've learned to be curious rather than judgmental. How would you
Mhm.
say, how would you say you've approached that? You had this past piece, these choices, those conversations, but then you move forward from those. So talk to me about your layers journey and kind of the accepting of all those pieces.
Well, like you said earlier, it can be really hard at first when you start looking at yourself and all
Mm-hmm.
of the dark side, the shadow, as some people would call your
Shadows.
shadow side,
Yeah.
but all the things that we're so afraid to look at about ourselves, the choices, the bad choices or unhealthy choices we have made. And it's actually, after you start doing that, it's actually quite liberating
Yeah.
once you really get into that, because if you can look at those pieces and say, look, if I had known better, I would have done better. And the truth is, I trust my heart. I know I have a good heart. The one thing I know about myself, no matter what, is that I do not want to hurt anybody. I
Mm.
do not want to hurt people. And
Yeah.
so people do get hurt because as we grow and learn and we go through life, there are lessons. And sometimes we play a role in somebody's journey or somebody plays a role in our journey, and there's nothing you can do. I had two women who were part of my organization. One of them I let go. I had to fire her. And the other one was her very good friend. And
Mm.
without notice, she just left. She up and left and quit. And these are women that I really care about.
Yeah.
They have given, 2.5 years of their lives to my business, and
Mm.
why they were angry, why they left, why things unraveled in the way that they did. Um, I can't, I don't know. I
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
don't know. But things happen, and I wish them well. I don't beat myself up over it. I know I did the very, very, very best I could.
Mm.
And to be honest with you, Melissa, the only reason I can, own a business the size of the business I have and do what I do is because I don't take these things personally.
Yeah.
And I know that these people, have their own experiences and their own lessons to learn. I hope that they will see the love I have in my heart for them, that I
Mm.
never meant them harm, that I did the very, very best I could. I never lied to them. I was transparent. I did everything above board to the best of my ability,
Mm.
and any stories they may have created on their own. There was not a negative bone in my body to want to hurt somebody.
Yeah.
So things will continue to happen. And the
Yeah.
reason I share that is because I would be beating myself up or questioning my own motives if I hadn't looked at all of these other dark parts of myself
Yeah.
and made peace with all of that.
Yeah.
I would not be where I am today. And,
Yeah.
I'm not putting myself on a pedestal. I understand that things get convoluted and entangled and people, start making up stories. And, all I can do is just hold them in my heart and wish them well.
Yeah.
I don't have an ounce of animosity towards them,
Mm-hmm.
or towards myself.
Right. That's the piece
You
there.
know,
Yeah. I think it's so important we remember that we're not going to be for everybody. And
no,
sometimes things just don't work out. And it doesn't mean that anybody outwardly did anything malicious or wrong. Sometimes they just don't work out. Sometimes they just have a season.
I have a very dear friend, Peggy, and she used to look at me and she would say, Lisa Minkin, that was my maiden name.
Mm-hmm.
You have come so far. I used to she was like, you have come so far.
Yeah.
And I used to, I used to laugh. She's lovely, but yeah, she saw me when I was at my worst.
Right.
She saw how hard I worked to get here. And like you said, this is hard work. I mean, it's wonderful when you get to the other side of all of this,
For sure.
And you don't get hooked and you can not take things personally. And, there's so much it says in the like Don Miguel says in the Four Agreements, when you don't take things personally, you become immune in the middle of hell. And that is so true.
Yeah.
It's like other people are in their own emotional hell.
Yeah.
But you're just like, okay, you have your story, I have mine. And, that's okay. Like, I don't, I understand where you're coming from. And I'm not hooked. I wish you well. I hope you look at whatever is coming up for you.
Yeah. I think that's, again, you hit that and piece, because that and piece is like, I can be compassionate, empathetic, and also not take this on myself because of the pace of the work that I've done. And as a business owner, especially, it will wipe you out and take you out if you can't make that distinction. You cannot stay there in a healthy way for a sustainable amount of time if you don't learn how to do that.
And Melissa, believe me, if a client or somebody came to me and that person said, look, this is what happened. This is, how I felt. I would look at my part.
Right.
I would look at my part in those things. The woman who left without giving notice, she didn't even come to me and have a conversation with me about anything.
Yeah.
So it's not even like I can do something,
right?
Or have, or look at my, say, oh my gosh, like I didn't see that, or I didn't know you were feeling that way.
Yeah.
If you don't give somebody an opportunity, or there's no conversation, what do you do?
Yeah.
So in that instance, like my hands are clean. I wasn't even given an opportunity. Somebody wrote a scathing, like this angry, mean review on Yelp of me, and like lashing out and whatever. And it's like, I wrote to her personally. I said, I can't help you if you don't come to me and have a conversation with me about what happened. I mean, my goal would be to work this out with you and figure out how to do this right. But if you don't give me that opportunity, there's nothing. Like, you can sit there and try to publicly shame me, but if you don't give me an opportunity to do something, what am I supposed to do?
Right. Yeah. I think sometimes people are so uncomfortable with conflict communication, they just would rather go that route. I think it's difficult. And also that understanding of, I can't, come to me and say, this is how you felt. I understand that even if my intent was this, if I came across in this way, but if you don't get the opportunity to even have that conversation, that's very difficult. But I think conflict conversation, and that's, again, it's that sign of that, doing that work, being comfortable in the uncomfortable, and being willing to be able to be that way with yourself first. But you're not going to be able to be that way with anybody else if you aren't first comfortable sitting in your own discomfort and working through that.
And honestly, doing the work I do, I'm going to be a target for certain things.
Sure. Absolutely. Absolutely.
If we are going to do anything of meaning or anything, and the truth is, if you don't have some people speaking out against you, you're not,
exactly.
You don't have a powerful voice. So I have to, you have to go against the grain. If everybody loves you, then that's also not good, because you're not challenging convention. You're not saying anything new. So,
but it's just that, that important component piece of of intent and being willing to sit in discomfort and have those conversations, but also understanding that when you're challenging narratives that aren't popular out there, or people doubt or guess against, if you're not getting some kind of pushback, you're not doing it the right way. Like, the most effective leaders are not the most popular. They're the most effective because they're willing to make the hard decisions. They're willing to call things out on things that might be a popular narrative, but there's a better way of doing things. They're willing to challenge that. They're willing to challenge people's expectations of the status quo. And so, and that's part of it. And so, and that in the work you're doing in relationships and what you know is possible, that's going to happen because, so I think that's a really good real life example of what can happen with these things when we're willing. But when we know what we know, you can't deny it. Like, you can't go back on that. Like, I know what I know. I believe what I believe based on my own journey. And so, if you challenge it or you don't want to believe it, I wish you well. I hope you find a pattern in a place that does work for you. But yeah, I think that's a great example of you're going to get pushback when you're pushing things that go against common narratives and getting people. You can't make someone see something they don't want to see. You can't make someone do their own work. That is their choice at the end of the day.
Well, and people aren't going to always agree. Like, I have a big thing about, like, a lot of women who are dating, a lot of very strong women will say, well, I want a man, but I don't need a man. And what a man hears when you say that is, I don't need a man.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I have pushed back on that. And I did a short clip on YouTube pushing back on that. And I had one woman come on and say, okay, Grandma, clearly you don't understand. Yeah. You don't go back to Facebook where you
wow.
You clearly don't understand modern women, and the truth is I understand modern women all too well.
Right.
I get what you think you're saying, but this is what men are hearing.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And this is why so many of you are still single. So it's, if you don't push back on convention, but you will get comments like that, which I thought was hysterical.
Well, it goes back to that power of your words thing again. Like, whether your intent was X, this is what's being heard. So how do we communicate in a way that is getting across what you actually want to be heard, want to be said? Yeah. So I think that's where we get caught up sometimes. We get so caught up in what is in our own heads, we don't think about how the other side might be receiving it.
We don't. But, that's also part of the fun of, again, going back to having fun with all of this.
Yeah.
If I'm not having fun and I'm not seeing the humor in some of this stuff and I'm taking it all too seriously, that's another thing. Like, I've got to laugh about some of this stuff because there's reasons why these women, and I'm not saying this as a judgment. Please know that. But there are reasons why people are single. And a lot of it has to do with their lack of ability to communicate effectively.
Yes.
So, when they're lashing out and they're not open and they're, writing scathing reviews on Yelp because they don't communicate directly. Like, it's that's all evidence of why these women are single.
Yeah. And it goes back to that hurt people thing that we talked about earlier. It really does. In living out feel, finding empowerment, embracing layers, how this has affected the quality of your relationship with yourself and with others. I mean, it is evident, but is there anything you want to kind of wrap that thought up with?
God, there's so many directions I can go in with this, Melissa. I really do think that the world is getting smaller and smaller. we are less far apart because of the internet, because of social media, because everything that's happening is
Yeah.
connecting everybody and affecting everybody.
Yeah.
And so, and I don't want to go too far on a tangent. I could, and I won't, but especially with what's happening with artificial intelligence and all,
Yeah.
these things, there really is a merging of our collective consciousness. And so
Yeah.
I feel like that is something that's really happening. I don't, we talk about the collective consciousness, but when we see all of the things that are happening in the world, what's happening with the individual is affecting us globally. What's happening with the community or with the government, it's all affecting everybody. And so when you ask about these layers and all, I just feel like, the whole of human consciousness, not even in a theoretical sense, not in a hypothetical sense, but in a very real sense, this is all merging. So that's how I would answer that question.
Yeah, no, you make a really good point, and we're in an interesting time with all of that, and how it's affecting our voices, our authenticity, our honesty, our integrity. I mean,
our sense of self,
our sense of
our self-importance. Like one of the things that will really be challenged in the very near future. So many people are going to lose jobs. So many jobs and careers will be obsolete. I mean, this is happening very, 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 very fast. People don't realize. And that is going to threaten and challenge everybody's sense of who they are and their self-importance.
Yeah.
I don't know where my job, I don't know where my career as a love coach will be. What's on the horizon for that. And I think we're all going to have to step back and reassess who we are, how we fit in the world, what our place is, how important we are. We can't build our self-importance around what we do anymore in the world. So, I think these layers are getting peeled back. Our layers are getting peeled back. And so many of us are going to be directly affected. So it's an interesting question.
It is. It's an interesting question. It's an interesting time. And it's one of the things that drove me to start each of these episodes with defining and introducing our guests by their character traits, because we have to have that sense of who we are, or we're going to be floundering, especially as these things continue to have that innate sense of who we are, what matters to us, what are our values, because the roles and the titles and all those things are not, they come and go, they're changing, they're evolving over time. And how we see ourselves and define ourselves and value ourselves is going to inform how we show up in these spaces and what we decide we will and won't be a part of. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Thank you. That was a very thoughtful answer. I really appreciate that, because so it's hard to go there. People that, it's easier to just like, I don't want to think about it. It's like, but if we don't, where are we going to be? What's the alternative choice? And I'm afraid we're going to see more of that than we want to. But that could be a whole other podcast episode.
Well, we're going there. I mean, it's like, I don't think, it's like people want to say, oh, I don't want to use social media, or I don't want to use a cell phone or smartphone, or I don't want to use this. And, look, ChatGPT was the number one fastest downloaded app of all time.
Yeah.
And this is only going to get crazier. I mean, that's really just, things that's all coming. But, it's a tangent that I can go on. I won't go on.
Yeah.
But I'm
Things we have to
surprised.
think about.
Well, so many people don't want to. And
I
trust
know.
me,
I
it's
know.
going to be happening faster and faster. Like within
Yeah.
this decade, this is the decade of all of
Yeah,
this.
it really
And
is.
yeah.
We're already seeing its
So
effects. I mean, we're already seeing its effects at a micro level, and it's the macro point. Yeah.
we
Oof.
ain't seen nothing yet, Melissa.
I know. Okay, but something to think about. I think just really stopping and considering that in whatever realm you live in, it's important to take these things into consideration. They do matter. They will have an effect. We can't just put our heads in the sand. I mean, there
Well,
has
and as I said to you earlier, I'm very much an early adapter of all of these things. And so, of course, I have not been studying AI since, many people studied it, 40 years ago.
right.
But I'm surprised how many people are not aware of what's really happening.
We're down to our rapid fire. Name 5 activities that nourish you.
Oh my goodness. 5 activities: being with my husband, playing with my dogs, walking out in the sunshine and just seeing spring happening right before my eyes, spending time with the people that I love, and doing my work, which is my deepest and truest passion.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. And 5 words on how you want to feel the next 6 months.
I want to feel compassionately detached.
Mm-hmm.
I want to feel open. I want to feel loved, and I want to love. I want to feel appreciation, and I want to feel lit up.
I love that. I love that lit up piece. That's a great way to describe it. That's just such a great way to wrap this up and to live your life. Live in a way that lights you up, that you're excited to get up each day and live the way that you're going to live. I love that so much. That's so good. Lisa, tell people how they can follow you and work with you.
Yes. So you can go to lisashield.com, and that is my website. All over the website, you will see the link to watch my free 45-minute presentation. At the end of the presentation, you can book a call with a member of my team, and they will hop on and talk to you about my 6-month emotionally naked dating program, which I am so proud of.
Yeah.
And we will talk to you how we can help you find the guardian of your soul. Please reach out to us. You can also, we do all kinds of things. This will air after this particular event, but every 6 to 8 weeks, we do a free live launch. They're usually about 5 to 9 days.
Okay.
We do an hour of teaching every single day. It's magical. We don't hold anything back. And so we give the same information, the same quality of information we give our actual clients in our course. So even if you don't, feel like you're ready to work with us right now, it's a great way to get a sense of the work we do.
Great. All right. Thank you so much for that. And we'll share all of this on our resources page and how to follow Lisa and her work. But I appreciate the work you do. I appreciate your honesty and authenticity in this conversation today. I think we need more of that in the world from all of us. So we can really live from our healthiest selves and be the best version of us for ourselves and for each other. I mean, I think that's got to be the goal. And we do this together. We don't do this in silos. We do this together. So thank you so much today. Field podcast audience, like I said, go to embracinglayers.com. You can find all of this information about Lisa and how to work with her and how to learn from her. Thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Melissa, it's been such a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. All right, Field Podcast audience, go out there, think about it this week. How are you showing up in relationships? What are you asking of yourself? What are you asking of your relationships? Is this where you want to be? Or do you believe or understand that if it's not where you want it to be, it can be better? Think about these things. There's resources out there, and you're valuable and you're worthy of living your best, most authentic life. And if you show up that way for yourself, you're going to show up that way to others. And that's going to attract the kind of people to you that you're going to want to have in your life. And we hope that you can take that away today. Thanks so much for being with us, and have a great week.